In the dense, fog-laden forests of Eldenwood, where the rustling leaves seemed to carry whispers of forgotten tales, there lived a widow named Agnes. Her husband, a knight, had died in service to the feudal lord. With no children or family to turn to, Agnes made her living crafting potions and selling herbs to the villagers. Some praised her skills as a healer, while others feared the strange symbols carved into the wood of her cabin and the eerie murmurs they claimed to hear as they passed her house at night. One dark night, during a storm that lashed the village with relentless rain and wind, frantic knocking echoed at her door. Agnes, seated near the fireplace, grinding dried herbs, frowned. Visitors were rare, especially in the middle of a storm. Walking cautiously to the door, she lifted the latch. Standing there was a knight, drenched and trembling. His cloak clung to his body, heavy with rain, and a bloodied sword hung limply from his hand. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperation.
"I need your help, man."
He stammered, his voice hoarse, as if he'd been shouting against the storm.
"Then come in."
Agnes said firmly, stepping aside. "You're letting the cold in." The knight stumbled inside, leaving muddy footprints on the wooden floor. He leaned heavily against the table, breathing hard. Agnes studied him closely. Beneath his armor, she noticed blood trickling from a wound on his side. Not deep, but troubling enough. She grabbed a cloth and tossed it to him. "Clean yourself up," she said, "and tell me why you've come." The man nodded, pressing the cloth to his injured side. "I'm Sir Edwin," he said after a pause. "I've made a grave mistake." Agnes stayed silent, her sharp gaze fixed on him as he continued. "I was drawn into a dispute over land. Words turned to violence. In the heat of the moment, I gravely injured a baron's son." His voice faltered, and he lowered his eyes. "I didn't kill him, but I hurt him badly enough that he may never recover." The storm outside seemed to rage harder, echoing the weight of his words. Edwin gripped his sword tighter. "I ran. The Baron's men won't rest until they find me. I will be punished for this, unless..." His eyes met hers, pleading. "Unless you can help me disappear. I've heard of your gifts, ma'am. They say you know of things beyond this world. I beg you, save me." Agnes crossed her arms. She had heard stories like his before, men seeking to escape the consequences of their actions. Yet as she studied Edwin, she saw not just fear, but also regret, a deep dread that reached beyond death. "Do you understand the price of what you're asking?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "I'll pay any price," Edwin answered without hesitation. Agnes tilted her head, intrigued by his resolve. "Any price, you say?" She walked to a shelf lined with jars and bottles, selecting a small black candle. She placed it on the table, lit it with a match, and watched the flame flicker, almost alive. "This is no simple request, Sir Edwin," she said, her voice gaining a weight that seemed to fill the room. "To help you escape, I must invoke forces that demand balance. You will be free, but you must give something in return." Edwin hesitated, his eyes fixed on the candle's flame. "I have nothing to offer," he said finally. "I left everything behind." Agnes let out a low, humorless laugh. "Gold and trinkets mean nothing to me," she said. "What I require is far greater." She leaned closer, her shadow stretching across the table. "Tell me your greatest fear," she whispered. "Offer me the truth of your soul, and the pact will be sealed." Edwin's breath hitched. For a moment, it seemed he would refuse. But then, slowly, he spoke. "I fear being forgotten," he murmured. "I'm afraid that everything I've done, every battle I've fought, every sacrifice I've made, will fade into nothing. That my name will be lost, like a leaf blown away by the wind." Agnes smiled faintly. "So be it." She blew out the candle, plunging the room into darkness. The next morning, Edwin left the village, vanishing into the vast forests. Rumors of the widow's pact spread among the villagers, but no one dared confront her. Life in Eldenwood went on, and Edwin's memory became a faint whisper. 5 years later, a group of knights arrived in the village. Leading their prisoner, a thin, gray-haired man in chains, was the Baron's son, now a hardened warrior. The prisoner was Sir Edwin. The villagers gathered as the Baron's son declared his triumph. "This man wounded me and fled justice for years. Now he will pay for his crimes." That night, as Edwin awaited his sentence in a cold, damp cell, Agnes visited him. Her face was untouched by time, her eyes as piercing as ever. "You," Edwin said, his voice barely a whisper. "You promised I would escape." "And you did," Agnes replied. 5 years of freedom, more than most would receive." Edwin let out a bitter laugh. "And now, I'll rot in this dungeon until I die. My name will be forgotten, just as I feared." "No," Agnes said, her voice quiet but firm. "Your name will be remembered, though not as you wished. A legacy isn't shaped by what we desire, but by what we do." The next morning, Edwin was sentenced to life imprisonment in the castle dungeons. His name lived on, but only as a cautionary tale of the knight whose pride and fear led to his downfall. As for Agnes, she returned to her quiet life, and the memory of the pact faded with Eldenwood's mists, leaving behind only questions and whispers.